Good afternoon, Suidlanders, and welcome to Suidlanders, the week in review for Friday, the 11th of August. Firstly, I'd like to apologize for my absence last week. I, 2 weeks ago, went down to the Eastern Cape to conduct some Suidlanders business. And while I was there, my host, Louis Hutton, whom many of you will know, fell very ill with adult mumps, which, as it turns out, is really quite as serious as our mothers made out when we were kids. Many of you will probably remember your mom and her friend, or your mom and nurses at a clinic saying things like, oh, it's better that they get it now than when they're older. It's terrible when you're an adult. Well, it turns out that it is very, very horrible in later life to catch the mumps. That led to me sticking around longer than expected and helping out just a little bit. Not very much. I couldn't keep up with those people. They work something unbelievable, very hard indeed. Nevertheless, it made it practically impossible for me to do last week's video. So, without further ado, here is a brief synopsis of the major events of the past 2 weeks. On Friday, the 28th of July, a coup d'etat took place in the West African state of Niger. The matter is being covered heavily by the mainstream media because of the suggestion of involvement of Russia's Wagner mercenary organization, and because Niger produces some of the world's best uranium ore, much of which is used in the French nuclear power industry. So it has become a matter of some geopolitical significance. The West African Regional ECOWAS organization, akin to the SADC, has vowed to intervene and today has ordered the activation of an ECOWAS standby force in Niger. On Saturday, the 29th of July, the Economic Freedom Fighters, Marxist political party, staged its public 10th anniversary celebrations at FNB Stadium in Soweto. Approximately 100,000 people filled the 95,000-seat stadium and the pitch with a sea of communist blood red. During the main event, the EFF leader Julius Malema stunned the world when he led the crowd in singing "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer," also making sounds like the firing of a machine gun. The horrific provocation led to vicious farm attacks across the length and the breadth of South Africa, in which victims have been beaten, burned with irons, exposed to boiling water, stripped naked, drowned in a river, sexually abused, and had their throats cut. The video has since led to media coverage across the world, much of it in defense of the evil song, but thankfully much of it not. In recent days, we've learned of the popularity of WorldCoin's global orb scanning project, in which participants are paid to have their eyes, the irises, scanned by a WorldCoin machine for the purposes of building a biometric database for cryptocurrency transactions. This authentication system is known as World ID, and it has attracted enormous levels of participation in certain poor countries. On the 30th of July, 2 young female farmers, sisters Yane and Elsume Smith, and a male friend, managed to apprehend 2 of 3 thieves stealing sheep on their farm, that is to say the sisters' farm, the farm that the 2 sisters farm alone, without husbands or men, in the Verkeerdevlei district. To cut a long story short, the police arrived to apprehend or to take into custody the 2 criminals who'd been apprehended. They were bound with cable ties, I believe. They were handed over to the police, and they complained that the 2 sisters had brutally beaten them. That led to one of the most cynical, spiteful, bullying events in the miserable history of the new South Africa rainbow. 30 police officers carrying semi-automatic rifles, among other things, among other weapons, staged a raid on the sisters' home. They broke down the door and proceeded to take the sisters into custody. It is an example of bullying of the weakest that is reminiscent, certainly in my mind, of Blowkrans and Wiener. A hopelessly bitter, cynical, jaded, miserable response to 2 women who were in fact the victims and not the perpetrators. On Thursday, the 3rd of August, Cape Town and surrounding areas were brought to a sudden halt in the middle of the day when the South African National Taxi Alliance, Santaco, went on strike across the Western Cape. The strike was called in response to the Western Cape provincial government and the City of Cape Town's law enforcement officers impounding taxis that were operating without licenses, taxis driven by drivers without licenses, unroadworthy taxis, and taxis operating on certain unlawful routes, or operating unlawfully on certain routes, in terms of the National Land Transportation Act. Given that the strike was called without notice in the middle of the working day, it led to hundreds of thousands of commuters across the Western Cape having to walk home or make some other arrangement. Over the following 7 days, up until late last night, when the strike was called off after an agreement was reached with the Western Cape government and the City of Cape Town, hundreds of thousands of days of paid and unpaid leave had to be taken by workers. Many thousands of children had to miss school, and innumerable patients were not able to visit doctors and hospitals. Incidentally, apparently the agreement reached last night is the exact same one offered by the Western Cape government and the City of Cape Town on day 1. Almost immediately, the strike assumed menacing racial undertones. Numerous coloureds produced videos for social media pointing out that there was no evidence that any whites, coloureds or Indians were participating in the murders, rapes, robberies, arsons, attacks on police stations, stonings of vehicles, truck arson, pillaging, looting, and other crimes that accompanied the strike, which has led to at least one commentator observing that it does not bode well for the ANC's vote in the Western Cape in next year's national general election, nominally scheduled for the 27th of April. Meanwhile, in Tshwane, municipal workers engaged in an illegal strike that led to the loss of various services across the metropolitan municipality. Again, over the same period, a video emerged of an inspection of the main sewerage station of the prestigious town of Mhlanga on the KwaZulu-Natal north coast, in which it was revealed that the African National Congress municipality's inability to maintain the sewerage works is resulting in 30 million litres of raw, untreated sewerage running into a local river, conservation area, and the sea. Finally, in news from Ukraine, the Telegram social media app is being flooded by videos of some of the most devastating Ukrainian losses since the beginning of the war. Over the past couple of weeks, I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I have seen more smashing, beating, thrashing, killing, destroying, blowing up, and exploding than I've seen in the previous 15 months. It is quite horrific, the losses being sustained by the Ukrainians. Some experts insist that Ukraine is on its last legs and shall have to sue for peace before the Northern Hemisphere winter begins, unless NATO begins a direct intervention. And here I'd like to say to you that we are observing these events with great somberness. It is our fear that the deliberate causing, generation, genesis, creation of this war is going to be extrapolated, that it's going to be continued with a major provocation by NATO in the next few months. It is very, very, very worrying indeed. I'll leave you with that thought, ladies and gentlemen, and look forward to seeing you next week. I'll be doing two major interviews, one with a politician. I'm being interviewed by a politician in Europe on Wednesday, I believe, and then on Thursday I'll be interviewed by a very large Russian television production house. So I might produce something on that to keep you all informed. Thank you very much for watching Suidlanders, the Week in Review. Goodbye and God bless all of you.